Ancient Epic, The Curse of Pharos. Continuation after the segment. The lighthouse was more than just a light. It was a symbol of intellect and the control of nature during the Hellenistic Age. Superior engineering and light technology extended. The geotechnical challenge, rising high on a sandy isle. To build a structure over 300 feet tall on a small island. Subjected to wave forces and earthquakes, the engineers under the Ptolemies had to push the limits of ancient physics. The architect Socrates of Cnidus built it not on the mainland, but on the island of Pharos itself, which protected the harbor entrance. This choice of location was strategic, but also a formidable engineering challenge. The foundation had to be constructed robustly to contend with the salty marine environment and the weak, sandy soil. They utilized massive blocks of limestone and granite, reinforcing them with molten lead, an anti-seismic technique far more advanced than using mere mortar. Analysis of height. Try to imagine this: 130 meters, 425 feet. That is the height equivalent of a modern skyscraper. It far surpassed every contemporary maritime structure. This sheer scale required a logistical and crane system that we can only speculate about. But it must have relied on the mechanical principles developed by Archimedes, a contemporary figure. The three-tier structure, the engineering system. Socrates divided the lighthouse into three sections not just for aesthetics, but for mechanical stability. The base tier, square, the largest, bottom section, whose function was to anchor the entire structure to the ground and withstand the strongest storms. Inside were quarters for guards, engineers, and a spiral ramp or mechanical elevator system for transporting fuel. The middle tier, octagonal, this intermediate structure served as a transition, reducing the surface area exposed to the wind while containing the internal staircase for ascent. This is where granite blocks were arranged in a load-reducing pattern. The lamp tier, circular, the summit containing the fire and, more importantly, the optical device. This is where Greek intellect shone. The secret of focused light. How could the small fire at the top of the tower project light so far? This is evidence that the Greeks understood reflective optics. They did not use glass, as it was not yet refined enough. But massive, superbly polished metal mirrors, possibly bronze or silver-plated copper. These mirrors were arranged in a parabolic or hyperbolic shape to collect and converge the light from the fire, then reflected as a powerful, directional beam. This turned the lighthouse into a gigantic, inverted light telescope, multiplying the light intensity far beyond that of a raw fire source. The fire was not just burning, it was controlled. Hole of Greek philosophy. Topic: the black hole of Greek philosophy. Why Socrates accepted death and hemlock. An old man, walking barefoot through the streets of Athens. He wrote no books, held no office, and accepted no pay. Yet, this philosopher was condemned to death. He had a chance to escape. His friends and students had arranged everything, ready to bribe the guards. But he resolutely chose death by the poison hemlock. Why did the greatest philosopher of Athens accept the death sentence? This was not an act of suicide driven by despair. This was the greatest philosophical act in Western history. A final statement about absolute loyalty to one concept: the social contract. We will investigate this historical trial to understand why the death of one man was more important than his life. If you want to uncover the truth behind the most controversial death in philosophical history, and dissect the conflict between the individual and the state, hit subscribe and turn on notifications immediately. The ancient epic community will take you inside the trial of Socrates. Setting the context. Athens after the storm. Socrates' trial occurred after Athens' bitter defeat in the Peloponnesian War. Athens was wounded, grieving, and searching for a scapegoat for its moral and political decline. In this context of chaos, people didn't need answers, they needed blame, and Socrates, with his relentless method of questioning, the Socratic method, had publicly humiliated too many powerful people. He was the perfect target. Part 1. The real charges and the grand declaration. The charges on paper. Socrates' opponents brought 2 official accusations at the trial. Corrupting the youth, he was accused of encouraging young men to doubt authority and tradition. Impiety, atheism. He was accused of not believing in the city's gods and introducing new deities, referencing his private, divine voice. The daimonian. Where did the truth lie? Socrates' real charge was intellectual challenge. Socrates famously called himself the gadfly of Athens. A gadfly is a small, irritating insect that constantly stings the large horse, Athens, to keep it from becoming sluggish and stagnant. He did not demand money. He only asked everyone to examine themselves regarding what they believed to be good, just, and moral. In a city that had just suffered a devastating defeat, that self-examination was seen as subversive and treasonous. A defense or a lecture? In the Apology of Socrates, as recorded by Plato, Socrates did not beg for mercy. He lectured the jury. He declared that instead of executing him, Athens should pay him as a beneficial citizen, for he had devoted his life to their enlightenment. When asked to propose an alternative penalty, he chose one that he knew would enrage the jury: a public meal in the Prytaneum, an honor reserved for Olympic athletes. This act was not arrogance, it was a moral declaration that he was innocent and a valuable citizen. Part 2. The social contract. Love for Athens. Crito's decisive moment. After his conviction, Socrates was imprisoned awaiting execution. This was when his philosophy had to face its ultimate practical test: life or death. His wealthy and devoted student, Crito, had arranged everything perfectly. The bribe money was ready, and the escape route to Thessaly was set. All Socrates had to do was walk out of the prison. But Socrates refused. The grand concept of law. In the dialogue Crito, Socrates debates with the very laws of Athens. He argued that escaping would be a betrayal of the social contract he had accepted throughout his life. He raised these crucial points. Tacit agreement. Socrates had lived 70 years in Athens. He had enjoyed the city's protection, education, and freedoms. Staying meant he had implicitly agreed to abide by all its laws, even if those laws led to an unjust death. Destruction of the system. If a citizen, due to the injustice of one verdict, were allowed to break the law, the entire legal system, the foundation of the city, would collapse. Over vengeance. The goal was not to seek revenge on those who harmed him, his accusers. The goal was to live by the principles that had defined his life. For Socrates, escaping was the easy choice, but it was the destruction of his philosophy. Part 3. The ultimate death and the greatest legacy. The art of dying. Socrates' final day is described in Plato's Phaedo, one of the most poignant descriptions of a philosophical death in literature. Socrates spent his final hours not mourning, but philosophizing with his students about the immortality of the soul. This was the ultimate unification of word and deed. Even when facing physical death, he still prioritized the pursuit of truth. As he drank the poison hemlock, a slow, paralyzing toxin, he maintained absolute composure. His final words were a reminder to Crito to pay a debt, to offer a rooster to the god Asclepius, the god of healing, implying that death was the final cure for the sickness of life. The enduring legacy. Socrates' death failed to silence philosophy. The birth of Platonic philosophy, Plato, his greatest student, left Athens in disillusionment and returned to write his greatest works, creating the academy and shaping all of Western thought. The concept of rule of law. Socrates' death affirmed the concept that the authority of the law must be respected absolutely, even when the law is flawed. Socrates' death was not the end of a life. It was the beginning of a new era, where philosophy was separated from politics, and it became the primary tool for seeking truth, not power. Socrates' death is a timeless reminder that sometimes, preserving a principle is worth more than life itself. Do you think Socrates was right? Or was loyalty to a flawed state an act of self-destruction? Comment below, share your thoughts, and join this great philosophical debate with us. Don't forget to subscribe to the Ancient Epic channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss our deep analyses of humanity's greatest legacies. See you in the next epic.